Thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast. I'm Mike Luke, coming to you live from a Monterey Travel Lodge. Tomorrow I will be in Tahoe. Tony Altimore coming to you live from his Florida swanky environment. Hello, Tony. How you doing?
Good. How you doing? Back the A.
Dude, back the A. We've got a lot to get through this show.
You doing it right?
No, you did. That's very good. Okay. I had a lot of people that wanted me to ask you what you look for, because I think we talk past each other sometimes, which when you're talking to a CIA agent, let's be honest here, you're not going to understand.
That was another life.
Right. But what you look for ideally in a power school per se. And we're going to get to that because I want to get Tony's take on that. But first, Pac-12 Media Day, Tony. It came and went, no deal, unity statements. What were your thoughts on Pac-12 Media Day?
So you and I talked, a month ago, and I said I didn't think they would actually have the deal done for Media Day. So it turned out to be exactly what I expected.
Right.
Not what I hoped, because, I think they should have taken some very, very firm, concrete step to stop a lot of the nonsense. That said, the fact that they haven't sort of shows that they're not bothered by the nonsense. So it wasn't anything that I didn't expect. I will say, one of the things that I find a little bit frustrating, and this is on the Pac-12's PR people. The Pac-12's PR people have missed the boat for so many months that I don't know. I mean, they're not even on a boat.
Right.
But one of the things that I thought that they did not do very well was I didn't think they prepped the commissioner very well to avoid, because this is the type of, they're in such a scenario and they have all of these like Big 12 idiot YouTuber hyenas ready to pounce.
Right.
And so as a result of that, you can't have a normal press conference. You have to talk like the chairman of the Federal Reserve, right? Like markets are going to move if you put a comma in the wrong place. And so, for example, Kliavkoff made kind of
let's get to that. Let's show that video real quick. I think this is where Jacob Franklin, if you could show that video real quick, and then we can get Tony Altimore to comment on this.
George, just to follow on what you just said, I think a response ago, because it caught a lot of people's attention very quickly. You just said you're not announcing a deal today on purpose because you want the attention to be on football.
Yep.
To be clear, that would imply that the deal is done and codified and just you're waiting until after today.
I think you're reading too much into that.
So then what is the purpose behind not announcing something, which is what you just said?
We want to have the focus on football today. We have an incredibly good football story to tell, and we want that to be the focus today.
Yeah, see, like how dumb that, and you showed the aftermath, which in a normal world would have been enough that no one would have ever talked about that. Oh, hey, you're reading too much into that, poor wording, whatever. Right. But this is not a normal world, and you can't afford to have that kind of slip up, which wasn't even really a slip up, but you have to be at 100%, not 95.
He did strongly imply that the deal was done, but they were just waiting for it to, because they didn't want Media Day to consume it, which leads me to my question. Do you think a media deal is done, Tony Altimore?
I think a lot of it is done. Again, I didn't think it was going to be completely done to announce. We said that in June by today. So I think core elements of it are done. Again, if I was running the media negotiations, which I'm not, if I was advising people who are running the media negotiations, which God knows I'm not, I would have made sure that they had something firm before this day. Something, anything. I mean, I'll give you an example of what they could do. And this is what if it were me and I was the commissioner, here's what I would do, which I'm not. I would have them. They have the broad outlines. The presidents know the broad outlines. I would have them sign a conditional grant of rights that says, if the final contract is above X dollars, blah, 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 and have that done. Because they seem to know, and they were told they know enough that they could do something like that. They're not doing that.
But let me ask you this, Tony.
Something needed to be done.
If they have this grand scheme of things, then how come they keep saying that they keep putting these arbitrary dates out there, some of them, and then it doesn't happen? And then we come right back to the same conversation we're having. Do they have a grasp of what's going on here, do you think?
Well, I think they do. I think one of the problems, again, this is a sort of issue, higher education, long extended contract periods.
Right.
For it to be 2 months, 3 months, even 4 months longer than you expect is fairly normal. That's just date slippage. I think your big question, Mike, and I think this is, some of your readers feel this too. Some of your readers have the question of like, is this all just fake? Is this all just fictitious? I don't think so. But they need to do something to show it.
The longer we go, though, does Tony Altimore, ex-CIA agent, start to get a little more circumspect, or no?
Well, we're officers, not agents, or we were. I'm not anymore, though. That was another life ago. I start to think, well, first of all, I know how these organizations work.
Right.
And I know how boneheaded they can be in terms of public media perception. I mean, is there anyone who cares less about what the public thinks of them than my one-time former government employer? No. Right. Actually, that's not true. The NSA does not care at all what you think of them. The agency is a little better than they are. But the problem with the Pac-12 is that they are not bothered by this unrelenting Big 12 nonsense, and I think that's dumb. I've said from the get. In fact, I've said, I don't know if I've talked to you about this. The company that I've even suggested to them that the company that they needed to hire was a company called Berman and Company, who specializes in dealing with craziness and attacks like this and countering it. Right. And they needed to have a counter PR firm just with teeth out, because they are under attack, but they very much are taking the sort of academic high road. I mean, why were they not at the AAU meetings, letting Doug Girard know, this is not going to fly?
What do you think, though? So you got the Big Ten, the SEC, they get their deals done, obviously. The Big 12 gets their deals done. And why is it that those three conferences get their stuff done and the Pac-12 just kind of talks? That's where I think the disconnect is, because I think Pac-12 people...
Here's the thing, though. But this is the huge thing. The Big Ten took, 11 months to sort theirs out? Mm-hmm. Nobody was... I mean, there are idiots, doing, Pac-12 day by day, we haven't heard anything on the internet. Nobody did that 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months into the Big Ten's negotiations. Nobody did that 9 months, 10 months into the SEC's negotiations. This is a very manufactured, pearl-clutching, hand-wringing. But I'll tell you the other issue, which I believe, and people disagree with me on this, and the Pac people disagree with me on this, but I think I'm right.
All right, Tony, let's hear it.
I don't think that they really started trying in earnest until probably after the new year, because the UCLA fiasco went into December.
I agree with you on that. How does that happen, Tony?
Well, first of all, here's how it happens. Have you ever seen a little kid be told to clean his room and he's in his room for 3 hours and it seems like nothing's cleaned?
Yes.
And it's okay, okay, exactly. Were you cleaning? Yes, but maybe not real hard. And then you get it all done at the end. So when we look at how long does this take, the fact that I don't think they really started in earnest until January. And also, by the way, if you look at what it would take for them to do this, and their staffing, the fact that the president of the network got fired in January, whatever, the CFO got fired in January, whatever, those types of changes, the Comcast audit that they were doing, that stuff is so disruptive that I don't think they were making meaningful progress until January. So in terms of that regard, we're only in month 7, which is about when we should be starting to wrap this up.
Why do you think, though, that people like Schultz, and I'm just stating, I'm not just speculating, have been so wrong on these dates then about, a couple weeks down the road? Were they just thinking that this would be wrapped up early? Why has there been so much confusion on statements, I guess?
Well, so there are people who said a while ago, who said I'm not in the room. I'm just... Tony, you're close enough in the room.
Come on, you're an influencer. Come on.
I wish I was. There are people that said that they had essentially the framework of the deal completed in, I don't know what that would have been, right around basketball media day. And that then the president sent it back for rework, which essentially means that they not start over, but take about 15 steps back.
Right.
So if that's true, and I'm taking that on the word of the people who usually do know these things. If that's true, then that explains. It's also not that abnormal. So again, the problem is that they are in a situation where they are being absurdly and unnecessarily hounded on this on a daily basis.
But don't you think though that their background and their track record deserves some skepticism on the on people's, because again, and like as you correctly pointed out, a lot of these presidents weren't here. But when you enable Larry Scott, when you watch your athletic programs go down the toilet, when you watch USC, UCLA taken out from under you, by the way, Tony Altimore, the great Tony Altimore,
they didn't get taken away. They walked out the door.
You were not surprised by this, but the Pac-12 was surprised by this. How does this happen, Tony?
I was surprised that they did it without Stanford and Cal.
Okay, but you were not surprised by the concept that the LA schools were going to leave, though.
No, not by the concept. I didn't think they would, because I didn't think they would without Stanford and Cal, and I didn't think the Big Ten would take all four.
Right.
In fact, I had a funny slide. I found a slide from like fall 2021 that I made so the news, there's a lot of people who claim the first reporting of the USC and UCLA. It's all bullshit. The first place that it actually came out was an Ohio State podcast. Ohio State has some of the best podcasts.
Right.
There's an Ohio State podcast who came out with it in October 2021, maybe even September 2021. And they were talking about USC and Oregon. And at the time I said first of all, USC would not go with Oregon. And I didn't think Oregon would ever go to the Big Ten, and I was right on that. And
we're going to talk a lot about Oregon, by the way, because I think there's Tony. You and I we're going to find common ground when it comes to Oregon. But go ahead.
Are you a Duck hater?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Man after my own heart.
But I'll get to that in a little bit here. I do want to talk though a little bit about what these conferences like and what somebody like yourself who's looking at this strictly from not strictly, but mainly from a power academic institution per se. But first, Tony Altimore, have you not been to Circle K?
I have not been to Circle K.
Listen, man, when you got Tony right there, not been to Circle K yet, but
we don't have any. I've never lived near one, I don't think.
Make sure you're not missing out on all the great stuff. Right now, text PHNX to 31310 to join their SMS subscriber club and get a buy one, get one free Polar Pop 32 ounce. Head to circlek.com/store locator to find one near you. All right, Tony. When you look at a power, because again, I think here's a little bit of the disconnect, I think, on both sides. When you look at it what are you looking at from a power institution? Something you loathe much of the Big 12 because you don't look at their institutions as power. Big time.
I think a lot of them are great, but they're great for them. I mean, the thing about the 5 conferences is each of the 5 conferences has its own culture, its own values, its own strategic aspirations of the institutions. And they join in very much like-minded ways. And you actually let's actually expand that out. Really, the probably about 9 of the major conferences are like that.
Okay.
And so, in that regard, how you have to look at things through the lens of each conference. Now, there's obviously let's pick on let's pick on Michigan. Michigan is awesome. Michigan would be wonderful anywhere. There's others that don't fit as well in places, but there's others that have sort of aspirations. It's like, who do they want to be? Who do they wish to be? Who do they aspire to be? And those are the schools that they want to be in the conference with or have in their conference.
Forget geographical purposes for a second. Let's just go off athletics and off the institutions right here. I'm going to name some schools right here and tell me if they would be. Tell me if they would be schools that, if you were the Pac-12, keep in mind you're not bound by.
We're not bound by geography.
Not bound by geography.
Well, that's the other hard thing, is that there is, a lot of it is if you think about almost imagine a sound mixing board, with all those different levers. There's a million different factors, and they're all in a different spot with every school.
But by and large.
Can you get enough of them on the green instead of the red?
Well, I'm going to name some of these schools right now. Kansas.
I love Kansas. So the Pac actually has been in various vettings and discussions with Kansas since the 1980s.
So Tony Altimore would be more than okay. Forget about geography for a second, even though it's not that far away. Tony Altimore,
Kansas will be fine.
Tony Altimore more than okay with that right there.
Also, remember the Pac-12 has a couple other variables. One of them is that the Pac-12 has a robust Olympic sports regular season, which a lot of the Big 12 schools don't deal with, right? Like they don't have swimming season in the Big 12. They just have like a tournament at the end of the year. So the Pac-12 values, it's not just geography, but it's logistics and travel proximity and the ability to go and have, a game on Friday, Saturday off, game on Sunday, and be home Sunday night. So a school like Kansas, big airport, easy to get to. All
right, Tony. So we got Kansas. How about West Virginia?
West Virginia.
Yay or nay, Tony Altimore? Yay or nay?
West Virginia is a state flagship school.
Almost
any power conference, major, successful state flagship school, I give them a pass on some of the marginal academic things.
Well, that's half the SEC right there, Tony.
Yeah, that's the thing about the SEC is people don't appreciate how important those state flagship schools are. Like Oregon, right? Like Oregon is nowhere near.
We're going to get to Oregon. Okay. You're not in interrogation mode right now. CIA hat off. Okay, so we got Kansas.
I love West Virginia.
We got Kansas and West Virginia. Tony Altimore more than okay. What about TCU?
Remember, though, the Big 12 has $100 million exit fee for anyone that wants to leave them, which is what I think makes sure that the Pac-12 will not go through and add Kansas or Houston.
Okay, so we got TCU next. Tony Altimore more than okay with TCU as well, correct?
See, here's the thing: is you have to look at Texas. And if you're looking at Texas and you say, okay, if you wanted to add in Texas, you'd probably want to add 2 schools, 1 or 2, because you don't want a whole vat of them. So you need to look at all of the different Texas schools and say, okay, of these, which would you want to add? So I looked at it in 2021. I love TCU. I thought SMU was a better fit for the Pac than TCU in 2021. I think it's even more true today. TCU is a great school, and the Pac has cleared, vetted, and actually in 2021, the Pac took TCU to the board as a recommendation.
All right, so TCU then, why would you take SMU over TCU, and TCU has better athletics and very comparable academics?
I think SMU has more culture, more upside, is a better strategic alignment in what their academic goals are, a better alignment of faculty. I mean, they've been rebuilding since the death penalty, and I think they've finally come out of that. I think that the legalization of a lot of this stuff frees you up of a lot of the risks, because they've always sort of been a risk factor.
So you'd be more than okay with TCU though, correct?
I'd be okay with TCU, but I'd want SMU instead. I wouldn't want 2 in Dallas.
Okay.
I mean, that's the problem the Big 12 has. They don't need a 3rd small private school in North Texas.
What about
they already got 2?
What about Houston? Tony Altimore has been admiring Houston from afar for many years, comparing him to ASU even.
I'm a huge Houston fan. Yeah, like Reno Couture, who's their president. Absolutely phenomenal president. She reminds me a lot of probably like Dr. Schaefer for you guys. Just one of those like inspirational people transforming the university. Again, Houston and TCU were the 2 schools that the Pac recommended the presidents add in 2021.
Okay, so we got 4 right there. Now, what about Memphis, Tony Altimore? Forget Memphis for a second. What about UConn? Okay. There's a lot of buzz about UConn to the Big 12. I know you don't see it happening.
So, no, I wish it would happen. UConn and Memphis, I think, are the 2 most perfect schools for the Big 12 to add. If either of them were in the West, I think the Pac-12 would have added them a long time ago.
Okay, so all right, so you're okay.
That's where you start to get geographic problems because they're a little too far.
But there's about 6 programs in the Big 12 where you would be okay with from a strategical perspective. Forget geography, adding to the Pac-12 theoretically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have lots of great. Remember, I don't know if you've seen when we've done the deep dives on Mark Rogers' channel. There are no bad schools in the Power 5 conferences. There's a couple that have some really serious problematic like values and discrimination things that make them no-goes for the Pac.
Right.
But as far as like actual like academic quality, there are no schools in the Power 5 that are just like no-goes.
All right. So a school. All right. Let's get to that.
But then you start to when you have to make trade-offs and limits, like, okay, these would all be okay, but we are only going to take 2. Then you start to say about, okay, which of the 2, and that's where you start to have to make some cuts, unfortunately.
All right. Let's get to that a little bit here. But first, Tony, do you bet? Tony Altimore, you strike me as a guy that goes to Las Vegas and you bet big at BetMGM. You strike me as that type. Is this true?
It is not true because I would always bet on the Trojans and they never cover.
All right, that is true. Or you would bet on the Big Ten, your conference from afar.
My native conference is a native Michigander, and they also never cover.
But here's what Tony Altimore needs to do. He needs to sign up with BetMGM. Use bonus code PHNX. There's a few different offers depending on where you live. But for our Arizona audience, place your first bet offer and receive up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if it loses with BetMGM. Again, make sure you use bonus code PHNX. Check out the show notes for full details. Let's hear Shane with the disclaimer.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 Massachusetts. 21 plus to wager. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP Arizona. 1-800-522-4700 Nevada. 1-800-BETS-OFF Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 Puerto Rico. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Kansas, Nevada, New York, or Ontario.
All right, Tony, this is the question that I've been wanting to ask you for quite a while now, and you will definitely be able to get this one. How does from an Arizona perspective, my degree, my parents' degrees, do they go down in importance, relevance if Arizona was in the Big 12 as opposed to the Pac-12? And so by how long?
There's actual research that says that they might. The actual research shows that schools that realign move towards the mean of the reputational rankings of the conference that they're in.
All right.
Actually, I should send it to you. It's a brilliant paper from Stanford did it in like 2014. They looked at all of the realignments of like the past like 30 years, and they looked at how the academic rankings were affected, and they found a pretty good relationship. But it's not just it's usually more about like what does the school want to be. And so you look at a president like President Schaefer from U of A, for example, when he took over U of A, you guys and ASU were not much different from New Mexico and New Mexico State.
Right.
You today are very, 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 very different from New Mexico and New Mexico State. Arizona is a world-class school. Arizona is a better school than anybody in the Big 12 in a lot of metrics. But what is
Arizona
different?
A better school than TCU, Tony?
Yeah, in a lot of rankings they are. Now in the US News, I think you're lower. Shanghai, you're way higher. I think you're higher in Wall Street Journal. I don't remember exactly. I'd have to check.
But Arizona, Kansas is somewhat comparable.
You're better than Kansas.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Keep flattering me, Tony.
Okay, no, I mean Arizona's a great school. You guys, I know you hate them. ASU is a great school.
They should not have been. They should not have been given the AAU membership. You agree with me, even if you won't agree with me.
No, I think they should have. I think they deserved it.
Okay. But so as Arizona's in the Big 12, forget all the papers and all that. Would the value of the degree in Tony Altimore's mind, would it go down, and would it be a noticeable down?
So the data would show that it would not be a smart move for President Robbins in terms of student recruitment, in terms of faculty recruitment and maintaining faculty, in terms of the research grant and the research support that you get, particularly from Cal and Washington. Right. Your reputation, again, this is Stanford Graduate School of Education did this, 2014 or 2015. Their data would show that would not be good for, ideal for your reputational scores. It's not the end of the world, but there's a reason that so far in the history of the 5 power conferences, no school has ever made an academic downgrade. Now, where I think we may sort of see there's one interesting factor in this, which people don't credit a lot, which is we mentioned the importance of the state flagship schools like U of A, like Oklahoma, like Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia. Yeah, those schools are really important. And so if you guys were looking at a conference that was like, I mean, again, and I've said before, Arizona would be great in the SEC even, but like the SEC is made up of a lot of schools just like Arizona. Great, big, awesome state flagship schools, med schools, big fan bases, the whole barrage. So if you were looking at a conference full of big state flagship schools that were very much of like mind, like strategy, all that, then you sort of say, is that really a downgrade? I don't think so. Like when people look at, I don't think Clemson is going to move from the ACC to the SEC anytime soon. If they were going to, is that a downgrade? No, not really, because Clemson's not the flagship school, but they might as well be. They're kind of like ASU.
But let's talk about a school like Texas. Texas marries a lot of different things together.
Texas is a conundrum in itself.
Right. I mean, but Texas you talk about a powerful state institution, right?
But here's the thing is Texas is a Big Ten school with a Pac-12 athletic department in a Big 12 state with an SEC fan base, English Premier League ego, and Soviet Olympic team expectations.
But being associated with the Big 12 did not bring any of that down there, Tony Altimore.
Well, Texas ran the Big 12. I mean, Texas was the height of it. But that's not the right question to ask. The question is, could Texas have been better off in the Big 10 or the Pac-12? And actually going back to when LBJ was working with Ed Pauley, as in Pauley Pavilion, to try to make Texas better aligned with the University of California, when DeLoss Dodd spent 20 years trying to get Texas into the Pac-12. I mean, there were reasons for that, which is that Texas is great. Could Texas be greater if they were in the Big 10? Institutionally, probably.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit about where this deal is coming from, the Pac-12 media deal, because that's at the end of the day, that's I think where everybody is still nervous about here. Because you got to remember, Tony, we're Arizona fans care about academics, but we care about basketball, and I get it.
You guys have great basketball.
Yep, we care about basketball, and we've also seen though.
Although you always cost me money because I become an A backer, and I put you in like the finals, and then
dude, that's on you, man. We didn't tell you.
No, it's on me. It's on me.
As long as you're betting on BetMGM, that's all that matters. But if you're Arizona, or you're looking for just stability, because there's going to be another breakup here. There's going to be another reemergence here, obviously, amongst the conferences. At what point, though, if you're an Arizona fan, you do understand that Arizona fans are very nervous because we've been through this with a group of presidents, and there are still presidents here that don't care about sports. Cal's president does not care about sports. I'm sorry, he just doesn't. ASU's president doesn't care about sports. So when you're talking about a deal right around the corner, and we've been talking about it for a year, and there's no media leaks on top of it.
I haven't thought it's been around the corner for a year.
Was that?
I haven't thought it's been around the corner for a year.
There's been many Pac-12 proponents, though, that have. How about that? Not Tony Altimore proponents, but other and some conference folks as well. At what point do we need to see a deal? Because again, Arizona fans are nervous about this, Tony. The near future stuff, that doesn't play well when you've been kind of bamboozled by the conference for a while.
I think they should have done it, and they should have probably taken what the plan was in February.
Right.
The real question becomes, to me anyway, is at what point is it actually destabilizing, not to the fans, but to the people in the room?
Okay.
And that's
what point is that, Tony? That's a great question. What point is that?
So that's the point that I can't answer, because you only know that if you're talking to people that are in the room.
Right.
And
there does come a point though where, outside of the media deal drying up, there does come a point though where it does become destabilizing to not have something done.
So I think they're stupid to have let it look destabilizing.
Right.
Because whether it is destabilizing or whether it looks destabilizing are two very, very different things. I continue to believe, and have said this the entire time, again, they should have hired Berman and Company to run a counter PR offensive against this. because I think looking like they were unstable. I mean, they have these like idiots just making stuff up. Like, I mean, there's like
instead of the PR, Tony, instead of the PR firm to combat it, how about a PR firm to get it done?
Well, so the PAC is working with SMA, which is a company that does this. The two big school companies that the PAC looked at this for, where they looked at Endeavor, who did the Big 10 and the Big 12 deals, and the PAC chose SMA because they've had a lot of good things working with SMA before. Mm-hmm. Was that a mistake?
Right.
Maybe. How much of that is on SMA and how much of that is on the PAC presidents? I'll tell you, I mean, the consulting work that I do a lot of times for companies, I can come up with a great idea and they can just, for whatever reason, not want to do it or screw it up. And even if it's the better idea or it's the better idea, but they can't implement it because of X, Y, Z. Right. And so in that regard, how much of that is on the SMA? I think it's SMA is the company who's the advisor, and how much of that is on the conference, and how much of that is on the PAC presidents, because the PAC and the Ivy League are different from don't let people tell you this differently. They're different from every other conference in how much power and authority their presidents have versus how much the conference has.
Now, all right. So at what point then is there a point for Tony Altimore when you say, you know what, Mike Luke, this needs to get done now. Does there come that point for Tony Altimore, and when is it?
So that point is where you say, okay, so you have a while before the TV deal is really an issue. Mm. I mean, quite honestly, I would if I were them, I'd replace the conference staff before I looked at moving somewhere else. Okay. Again, I don't think they want to move somewhere else. I mean, they have been begged. Agreed. They have had.
Tony, you and I totally agree on this one. Nobody wants to make the move. There's 100% across the board. Totally agree with you on that. But at some point, though, you've also got to be able to have your athletics broadcast on something where you're also not making $19 million a year on streaming.
I don't know that that's an accurate number.
I know. I'm throwing that out as a joke. I'm being silly.
I know, but there are people blasting this fake information, which again is where I think the Pac-12 is completely screwed up in that they're letting a perception get out there, which they never should have. They should have had a counter PR. Again, they're being targeted with very, very, very professional antagonistic PR, and they should have had a counter PR firm hired to deal with that.
So you're saying that the Pac-12 presidents are tone deaf. Is that what you're saying, Tony Altimore?
Oh, was there ever any question about that? It's part of their charm.
But here's my question, though. Why do you trust them?
Well, first of all university presidents are tone deaf. Because remember, these are people dealing with, like, unions on strike. They've got, like, students, like, protesting and camped outside their offices. And we're like, but the Big 12 is mean on Twitter. Right. And so, in their realm of world problems, the Big 12 being mean on Twitter is not on the top 100 things of the top 10 list that they have to deal with.
Derek Schipple right here with an interesting remark. But first, OG's right here. Tony, you strike me as a guy that has an okay time sleeping. Is this true?
Usually.
All right. Well, maybe not for Tony.
If there's anything good on Netflix.
Flavoring life is what makes OG's, and it's all about us. So much easier with wide range of flavors and functions. No matter what it is that you need, OG's has a gummy for it. Check out OG's online at OG's Brands and on Instagram at OG's Brands. You can find their products at your local dispensary. Must be 21 years or older to enjoy responsibly. All right, I think Derek Schipple hits the nail on the head right here. He says,
what do you have to say?
All right, here's what he says. The PAC had demonstrated incompetence and hubris for the last decade. He's referring to athletics. I do not understand why some people are so certain it's all just a matter of going to work out fine. Tony, he took all of my notes right there and he put it in there.
I love
From an athletic perspective, he's right.
Well, and so, Derek, I think you're right in the idea that it looks worse. And I think it's dumb that they are letting it get to this point. I think it's insane that they let the commissioner get up there on Media Day without this thing done. Again, when I look at it from a PR standpoint, from a brand standpoint, from an imaging standpoint, and a strategy standpoint, is it insane that they let him get up there and do that? Yes. Now, from a pragmatic standpoint, the presidents have said, hey, you know what? You're going to get up there and you're going to take the bullets for us. Like in reality, Kirk Schultz and Bobby Robbins and Mark Tessier-Levine, God love it. He's finally gone.
You're going to replace him.
maybe Robbins. Who knows? I mean, if I was going to BetMGM and I was going to say who's going to replace Mark Tessier-Levine, the two names that just sort of would come to most people's minds, I think, are Christina Johnson from Ohio State and Bobby Robbins from Arizona.
I have no insight on this, but I
don't either. I have nothing to do with that committee.
I don't believe that happens.
Names that come to
think
mind.
Robbins likes, and again, there's no problem with this. If I was a man of his stature, I would have an ego as well. But I'm not saying that I don't right now. But I will say that I think he likes being front and center of good athletic events, especially basketball. I mean, he likes sitting there for a reason. I don't see that one. There. Yeah, for sure. I don't see that one changing right there.
Although it would be kind of a funny situation because he's on the PAC's exec board now. And one of the things that the Big Ten was doing, unfortunately, this is a really sad situation, but she passed away of cancer before taking the job. Mm-hmm. But Becky Blank from Wisconsin was going to Northwestern and was keeping her Big Ten vice, I don't know if she was the vice chair or whatever, was keeping that seat when she made the move. Even though she was switching schools, she was keeping her same forward rotation seat.
Would Brett Yormark have had this deal done?
I don't know because I don't know.
What's your gut tell you? You're not going to get in trouble, Tony. What's your gut tell you?
So I respect him. I think he's smart enough that he would know. So he actually gave a great interview was released today with Joel Klatt, where he said my style would not work in every conference. Right, but I think he's smart enough to adjust the style that he would need to work with the Pac-12 presidents. I don't know if the deal would be done based on what the presidents want, but I think that the PR messaging, nobody would be having daily conversations about it. He would have had the PR messaging so dialed in and nailed down the whole time that there would be none of this talk.
Right. I agree with that. Let's talk about Oregon a little bit here because, Tony, you actually got me on a lot of what you say I think is nonsense, even though it comes from a great spot. But I'm just kidding. You're my guy for sure. But
we talk and laugh back and forth all the time.
Yeah, for sure. It's been an interesting friendship that's developed for sure. Back the A. All right. Let's talk Oregon, though, for a second. You got me onto this one. I always thought that Oregon, with the LA schools leaving, was going to be the one, the flagship. No. Washington is the one that carries all the weight right here from an academic /athletic/ major city. Washington is greater than Oregon by a mile. I know Oregon's got Nike, I know Oregon's got Nike, which keeps it afloat, obviously. But without Nike, Oregon is absolutely nothing.
We're hurting our eyes.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Whereas Washington has that. Now, let me ask you this. If you're the Big Ten, isn't Washington a very natural fit as a possible next program?
So I've said since June 30th of 2022.
Can you be more specific?
Actually, the day that USC and UCLA left. In fact, I said even a long time before that I thought what I sort of call them the Pac-5. The Pac-12 was originally the AAWU. So, right. But the five founders of that are USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford, and Washington. Mm-hmm. And so if I were the Big Ten, again, I would have taken all five. But I am not the Big Ten, and I think Fox disagreed. And so they have said that the valuation of Washington doesn't talk about or doesn't hit the numbers that they need to. Again, if I were the Big Ten, I would have done it. If I were the Big Ten, there's no question I would have added Stanford. I mean, the Big Ten president's fundraising targets on a trip to San Francisco every year, I would think would vastly exceed the revenue difference in Stanford. It makes no sense to me that they didn't, but because they didn't, and because they've been so clear that they're not taking them, I get a lot of flack from people who are like, oh, you don't like Washington. I love Washington. I think Washington's awesome. I would have taken them to the Big Ten, but the Big Ten didn't.
All right, now let's talk about a little bit about the schools that you would add to the Pac-12 right here. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the Big 12 is adding, and we'll compare and contrast right here. But also, tap and bottle watch parties. Tony, we're in Tucson, so when Arizona plays away, we go to Tap and Bottle to watch the games right there. Scott and Rebecca downtown do a great job. Look forward to seeing you there for football and basketball. Tap and Bottle, check it out. Great times, great people. All right, you want to add SDSU and SMU to replace USC and UCLA. This is correct.
So those were the top two that I actually put out a whole recommendation, a bunch of numbers with it and everything. 2 days after USC and UCLA left, I think that they are both they are strategically, institutionally, and athletically the best three ads. But I think SDSU is just so strategically important beyond all else.
All right, but from an academic perspective, we're talking about a school that would come in and be the only in front of Oregon State and Washington State, correct?
I think they're in front of. Are they in front of Oregon? They probably should be
in front of Oregon as well.
They might be in front of Oregon. They're in front of Oregon in some rankings, probably.
Okay, so they
probably pretty similar to Oregon. But remember, San Diego State, when we look at academics, because one of the things when you look at academics, just like we talked about with West Virginia, you look at West Virginia's academics; they're the second lowest ranked in the Power Five.
Right.
But what are the issues? The issue is that West Virginia has an institutional goal and mandate that is different from Michigan or Berkeley or Florida. So San Diego State has an academic mandate, and this goes back to the founder of the Pac-12 actually wrote the California Higher Education Master Plan, which is why San Diego State doesn't issue PhDs. So San Diego State to not issue PhDs, I think they just got permission to give like 10 a year or something like that. But I don't know, whatever the numbers are. But for them to be as successful as they are, San Diego State has a 33 or something % admissions rate.
Right.
Would be third in the Pac-12.
And it's significantly better than it was 10 to 12 years ago.
Way better. Yeah, exactly. So for them to be what they are is great. And you look at that and you say, all right, is it good enough for the Pac-12? I think absolutely. Again, third best admissions rate in the conference is probably good enough for the Pac-12.
Right. All right. Fair enough.
I'm all on board. Yes. But I'll tell you, most importantly, especially for you guys at Arizona, and this is like a Michael Crow and Bobby Robbins and, whoever the new Stanford acting president is and Carol Christ and also Utah and Colorado, they need to be thumping that there is a strategic importance for them of having a presence in Southern California for fundraising, alumni engagement, new student engagement. I mean, all that stuff. ASU's got a campus in LA. Those people need to be able to go to ASU games in Southern California. I think it is insane, truly insane, if they do not add those teams. And I think they should do exactly the same thing Bobby Robbins should do in the Pac-12 board meeting, exactly what Jack Hubbard did when we added you guys. Right. When Washington and Stanford were a pain in the neck about adding Oregon, they stood up and they said, we're going to the media in 15 minutes. We're either telling them we've added Arizona and Arizona State, or we're telling them that USC and UCLA are gone. And I think Arizona should do the same thing because San Diego State is important to Arizona.
Do you think in their heart of hearts, the deal that if ESPN Fox had to do it all over again, do you think they would prefer to have the Pac-10 or the Big 12 for that deal with the Big 12 signed?
I think they'd like to have them both. I think they're probably still going to have some Pac-12
So they're
games.
fairly equal then, Tony Altimore.
Oh, well, you've seen the data charts I've showed. Right. Athletically, in terms of other than Stanford and Washington, which are sort of in their own little stratosphere in athletics.
Right.
Other than Stanford and Washington, athletically and in terms of TV viewership, when you break down TV viewership by key factors, Pac-12 and the Big 12 are very similar.
So the only real difference from Tony Altimore's view is the academic profiles, correct?
Well, it's not just the academics, it's the institutions, institutional values, institutional strategy. I mean, all that kind of stuff is pretty different. I mean, again, it's different from the SEC to the Big Ten. It's different from the ACC to the SEC. It's different. But it's very different from the Pac-12 to the Big 12.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about Colorado here in a second, because they're the ones that I think have a little peeps, maybe the Tony Altimores of the world, a little uneasy. But first, Four Peaks. Tony Altimore, have you ever had Four Peaks Brew?
No, I need to try it.
Oh, it's very, very good. Check out Four Peaks Brew or Four Peaks Pub to keep up with the latest at Arizona's hometown brewery. Must be 21 years or older to drink Four Peaks. Please drink responsibly. and Shady Rays. What kind of sunglasses do you wear, Tony?
I sound like I need some Shady Rays.
You do need some Shady Rays, but you know what? If you want to go with a little bit of a CIA type look to you, Shady Rays has it exclusively for our listeners. Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. Go to shadyrays.com and use code PHNX for 50% off 2 pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. All right.
Nice.
Colorado, Rick George and the president have said that they wanted to see numbers this past week. They were quoted on it, so I'm not surmising. There were apparently no numbers, and Rick George left without really taking much media questions. Tony, what do you think about Colorado and all of this, and do you sense a destabilizing factor out of Boulder?
Well, so first of all, let's be honest. Colorado, I love CU. I think they're wonderful in the Pac-12.
Campus is amazing.
Campus is amazing. My cousin went there. Some of my best friends in the world went there. I love what they're doing. I love what Rick George is doing. So I'm all bought into CU. But the truth is, if you look at their ratings and their numbers and you look at their athletic department performance, quite honestly, they are not beneficial to the Pac-12. So if they wanted to go, like the Pac-12 would be better off with San Diego State than they are with Colorado. That said, I don't want them to go anywhere. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But the loss, it would not be a loss to the Pac-12. It would actually improve the Pac-12's football data if they lost them.
Well, but yes and no, because as long as
I don't think they're going to go. I don't want them to go. But I think it's important that we're also cleared. We are talking about the worst school data-wise in the Pac-12 by far.
Right, but that's also going to be a little bit different this year. Granted, Dion could easily be a flash in the pan, but they also had 85,000 people out to their spring game. They're going to sell out this year.
Well, they have 40 on national television. They only seat 40, 45
or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, but I mean, people talk about that, but it's like, okay, we're talking about 45,000 people here.
But they're also going to be on national television for all their games too.
Well, until they're 2-9.
True.
Until they're 2-9 and he goes to Auburn because Hugh Freeze is run around preaching to more hookers in his phone book.
Right. So at the end of the day, though, Tony Altimore trusts the Pac-12 presidents there to get it done, even though Tony Altimore doesn't necessarily trust them in other avenues.
I do not trust. I mean, I think that they have failed the PR game, or they've decided they're not going to play the PR game.
Right.
Is that the right strategy or not? I don't know. I'll give you an example. Kliavkoff talked about essentially giving almost Michelle Obama quotes of the whole we go when they go low, we go high. Right. And that's a wonderful sentiment. And it's wonderful to teach that to your children. How well did that work in that election, by the way? It did not work very well in that election. I don't think it's worked well here either. All
right, let me ask you this. Do you buy that the longer the Pac-12 waits, the bigger the media deals get, the more money they're getting? So maybe they should just hold off for as long as they can so they can keep getting more money. What do you say to that?
I'm not in the room, so I can't vouch for that, but I doubt that they were lying.
Really? So you think the longer wait, the better?
I mean, again, these things are usually on, various curves, and a lot of it have to do with other factors. So right. When they say the longer that we wait, that doesn't mean that we go forever, but it may mean that maybe in February or March, they didn't have as many suitors as they have now. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I look at it and I know that the games are going to be accessible. They're going to be more accessible than they were on the Pac-12 network. So It doesn't bother me. It really bothers some people. And there's also, by the way,
but you would say that there's a reason that no other of the major conferences went with a majority streaming route for a reason.
Well, so first of all, you're only talking about the Big 12, right? Because the Big 10 and the SEC are in another stratosphere.
For sure.
Of their TV arrangements. The ACC negotiated theirs in I don't know what the Carter administration, whenever actually wasn't, it was early Obama administration.
But even with
you're just talking about the Pac-12 and the Big 12.
But even with the Big 10 and the SEC, the only thing that I would add to that, though, is if streaming was more ideal than actual linear, then I think that they would have probably preferred a far heavier streaming component than a linear component, no?
Well, for the Big 10, the Big 10 did it brilliantly because the Big 10 has taken the NFL approach, and the Big 10 is putting their games on ABC, NBC, Fox, CBS, and NBC. The
Right.
SEC and the ACC are taking up the slots on ABC. The Big 12 is going to find itself, sort of fit in, some of those other spaces. I'll tell you, when you look at their TV numbers, when you take out Texas and Oklahoma, people do not appreciate. I think I've sent you charts on this, but people do not appreciate the gut punch that their TV numbers take when you lose that Texas and Oklahoma relevancy.
But you also, when you look at it, though, I think the thing that your mark, though, that I think is an interesting strategy, though, is his strategy is clearly this: we're not going to be the SEC or the Big Ten in football, although I think Big Ten football still sucks. But we're going to
help
be
is on the way, Big Ten.
Yes.
Help is on the way.
We're going to be the best basketball conference out there, and he believes obviously the basketball is undervalued. If you bring in UConn, it clearly becomes the best basketball conference in the country.
Now, I was told by somebody the other day that they do not have. And this is as of the other day, so
presidential votes.
These can be changed. Yeah, that can change. One thing I will say about your mark and his board is that I bet your mark can convince his board to do something that it's reluctant to do.
Right.
Whereas, as we saw with TCU in Houston in 2021, the Pac-12 board does not. The Pac-12 board views the Pac-12 commissioner as an employee,
right,
and not as their boss.
All right, Tony, before we sign off here, because I'm going to go to Tahoe.
Go to Tahoe.
All right. So at what point, though, is there a point where Tony Altimore starts to say this is starting to be destabilizing not having a TV deal?
So I think it's been destabilizing for a long time, or I think it has given the impression of being destabilizing for a long time.
Not appearing to destabilize, but practically destabilizing.
Practically destabilizing, that's up to the presidents.
Tony, come on, give me. I asked for Tony Altimore.
So if I were a president, I would have been raising holy hell in months and months ago.
Tony,
I'm not in the room to know what they know.
Right, Tony, you're the man, dude. We appreciate you, and I'll definitely be in correspondence and a bunch more. Back, can I get
anytime? Back,
Tony Altimore.
See you guys.
All right, for Tony Altimore, I'm Mike Luke, Jacob Franklin. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.